Hello and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today I was going to talk about constellation or Rashi categories from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective. And before I start the talk, I just wanted to thank everybody for their support of my work and the channel, all the subscribers and all the likes and comments and questions. I appreciate your interest again in what I'm doing here on the channel, but also your general interest in Vedic astrology. So thank you for all of that. Before I start with the talk, just a note. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology or Jyotish are in my concepts playlist. Whenever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means I have a teaching video on the topic. Excuse me. Because astrology in general can become very technical. There's a lot of jargon. And then on top of that, with Vedic astrology, we have a lot of concepts to translate from Sanskrit. So videos I would suggest to watch before this one, to I think get more out of the talk, is Introduction to Constellations or Rashis. Then there's North, South, and East Indian style charts, if you're not familiar with them. Introduction to Navigating a Birth Chart. Also the Lagna, Ascendant, Rising Sign, First House, that video. And then another video that's on my other YouTube channel, the other YouTube channel is called Nature Source Care. It sounds kind of funny that this is included here, but I did this video called Spiritual Nutrition, the concept of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas on that channel. And we're actually going to be using those concepts of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas today. So, yeah, so that's where I would start with other videos before this one, if you're new to all this. All right, so the first category or Rashi category I want to mention is the elements. So in Indian culture, like Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, as well as Vedic astrology, Jyotish, they think of or they consider five different elements. Fire element or Agni, as it's called in Sanskrit, the earth element or Prithvi, as it's known in Sanskrit, air or Vayu, water, which is known as either Jala or Ap, and then there's space or ether, which is known as Akash. So there are five different elements, but actually four of them are significant categories in terms of Vedic astrology. So let's talk about the first one. The first one being fire Agni, and there are three different constellations or Rashis in this category. There's Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, and these correspond with the first, fifth, and ninth constellation of the zodiac. Okay, there are shapes associated with each of these elements, and also like again, if we're linking this with Ayurveda, because again in classical culture, Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, and Jyotish were actually done together. And there's a whole kind of line of doing medical astrology. So, anyway, for fire constellations, Aries, Leo, Sag, there is a shape associated with that, and the shape is a triangle. And then the Ayurvedic constitution type is Pitta, so a fiery individual. Now, what does it mean to have, and we have all of these, that's the thing is we have all of these elements, everybody has all these elements in all of our charts. It just can be a matter of which ones are a little more prominent, which ones are more influential. Like if you have all of your planets in fire signs, or fire constellations, it's going to be a very fiery planet, a very fiery person. Okay. So what does it mean, to be a fiery constellation? Well, one, the energy here is very action oriented. This is a mover and a shaker. There's transform, think of fire. Like, what does fire do? It transforms things, right? It burns things, it turns things to ash. It spreads, right? It reshapes things, it rises, especially when there's a lot of wind. And so, this kind of energy, this transformative energy of fire, um, is most related to the spiritual aspect of our lives, where we take daily action, daily activities, and we process them and we connect them with something higher. Yeah. When a fire sign is imbalanced, then what you might see in that sign or in that constellation, and again, we have all of these, you might see imbalances such as excessive activity or extremism. And this also correlates with the idea of a Pitta Ayurvedic constitution, because Pitta people, when they're imbalanced and they're kind of on the extreme side, they can become rigid, dogmatic, angry, just very set in their opinions. Yeah. All right. Um, then we have the Earth sign or Prithvi, and the three constellations here are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. So the second, sixth, and 10th constellations of zodiac. The shape associated with Earth signs is a square, and the constitution type is Vata or an air, um, dry constitution type. So Earth is related to things that are structured and material, practical. And the Earth signs relate mostly to our physical life. Okay. When there's an Earth sign that's imbalanced, what you might see is that they become so stuck because, again, they're Earth, right? The Earth builds things that they can become so structured that they're inflexible. And so that can be a problem. Okay, so air signs or Vayu, there are three of them: Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. So the third, seventh, and 11th constellation of the zodiac. So the shape associated with air signs is hexagon. And they have a mixed constitution type as far as Ayurveda is concerned. So they can be a mix of Pitta Vata or Vata Kapha or Pitta Kapha, that sort of thing. Now, the nature of air and the nature of these air constellations is that they circulate, and there's kind of learning and expansion. And this correlates mostly with the mental life of somebody. So an ideal person is very much an air sign. When they're imbalanced, people become too airy and they become flighty or scatter, that sort of thing. Then we have the water constellations, so Jalar Up, and there are three there: Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. So the fourth, eighth, and 12th constellation of the zodiac. The shape associated with water is the crescent, like a crescent moon. And there's a correlation there because the moon is an emotional planet and water is an emotional element. So the Ayurvedic constitution type associated with water signs is Kapha, or um, which tend to be a very watery type of constitution. And the nature of water signs is that they tend to internalize because, again, it's all about the emotion. So they internalize experiences and they can be very nurturing and they tend to like level things the way water tends to level itself out. Like it tends to, if it's high, it goes low, that sort of thing. Because it's looking for balance. And so the water constellations correspond mostly with our emotional life or with somebody who has a very emotional life. When they're imbalanced, water signs can become hypersensitive because they become too emotional and they can't process things. They kind of get flooded with emotions, yeah, flooded with water. Then there's space or ether, also known as Akash, and that's not related to a specific constellation. Actually, all of the constellations incorporate space or ether. The shape associated with space or ether is a dot or bindu. And again, they just permeate the others. And so in that way, the space or ether element is supportive and it's a promotes, and it's also a universal element. Okay. So if we look over to the right here with this little mock-up of a chart I've done. So we have in the top square here, the rising sign, ascendant, Lagna, first house, they're all the same thing. We have a 1 there. 1 corresponds with the first zodiac constellation, so Aries. So what I've set up here, and this is a North Indian style chart. If you go, you want to count backwards to count the different um, houses. Yeah. So the first house is there, Aries. Then you go back counterclockwise to the second house, which is going to be Taurus, because the two corresponds with the second constellation of the zodiac, and so on. Yeah. So I've color coordinated them here. So the fire signs, fire constellations, I've colored red. So Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius being the first, fifth, and ninth constellation, um, I have in red here. And you can see that there's actually a triangle. Yeah. And you'll see that I only drew the red lines in for the red or highlighted fire constellations, but you could do the same with the others. So the earth signs, if you draw a line between 2, 6, and 10, you will get another triangle. If you draw a line between 3, 7, and 11, you will get another triangle. If you draw a line between 4, 8, and 12, you'll get another triangle. So they're easy when you know one fire sign or earth sign or whatever. It's easy to spot the other ones because they're in a triangle. Okay. So that's helpful with just, eyeballing charts and stuff like that. So you don't have to constantly look things up. So those are the elements as far as they're related to the Rashi categories. Okay, then we have another set of categories here. And this might be a little bit farther out in terms of concepts because it's hard to translate into English. Harder to translate in English, but this is what we call the gunas in Sanskrit, or what's called the gunas in Sanskrit. And these are, again, it's hard to translate, but you can think of them as tendencies, but they're not tendencies in terms of action or thought. They're tendencies in terms of energies. Okay, so there's three different gunas. There's sattva, rajas, and tamas. Okay, so sattva, there are other names for sattvic constellations, which are Dvisvabhava, mutable, and dual. And there are four constellations that are considered sattvic. So there's Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, or the third, sixth, ninth, and 12 constellations of the zodiac. Okay. Now you will notice that all of these houses that are sattvic are owned by either Mercury or Jupiter. Okay. And again, the tendency, but again, I think of it more as energies of being sattvic are purity of heart, spirituality, clarity of mind, intellect, because there's clarity of mind, somebody has more of a tendency to be intellectual because the mind is clear and well functioning. Cheerfulness, peacefulness, modesty, contentment, bliss, compassionate nature, austere, harmless, truth, and gentleness. These are all the sort of qualities of sattva. Okay. Now, just because somebody is like a Gemini or Virgo Lagna does not mean that their entire nature is sattvic. If I remember correctly, I think Hitler actually has a Virgo Lagna or rising sign, which if you just went on this, it would mean that he was all of these characteristics, which clearly he was not. So anyway, these are just tendencies. So there are a lot of other things at play in terms of describing somebody if you're looking at a horoscope for some person. But just to understand the energy of, or at least the potential energy of a particular sign. Okay. And again, it depends on, since all these signs here for Sattva are either owned by Mercury or Jupiter, what is the condition of Mercury or Jupiter? Are they exalted? Are they debilitated? Are they combust? So the condition of the lords of these signs will change these properties. Also, what planets are in these houses. So maybe you're a Gemini, Lagna rising sign, and you have Mars, Saturn, and Ketu um, in Gemini. I mean, those are all malefic planets. So, you have to consider all of this. Again, this is just another layer, and there are many multiple layers within Jyotish that you have to integrate. Okay. So the first category is Sattva. Now, I'm going to go through Rajas and Tamas, and by comparison, when you read the description of them, just by the way that they're described, they're often people almost be like, "Oh wow, I wish I was a Gemini," or "Oh, am I really that bad if I'm a Rajas or Tamas person or something?" Okay, so one, um, definitely don't take this personally. Again, they're just energies. The other thing is that all of us, again, have all of these tendencies within us. We all have sattva, we all have rajas, we all have tamas. Okay. The other thing in terms of not taking it personally, I think I have another YouTube channel, Nature Source Care, where I talk about natural medicine, including things like Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine. And I created a video called Spiritual Nutrition, the Concept of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So in that video, I actually talk about different foods and how different foods can promote these different qualities. So fresh fruits and vegetables and nuts and grains and, the things that are, quote unquote healthy and we're supposed to eat. All of those things create more sattvic tendencies within all of us. Okay. And tamasic food, for example, highly salted, highly sugary, fried, highly processed food, food that like leftovers that have been sitting in the fridge for 2 or 3 days. What are considered kind of lower energy foods. Um, that's a tamasic quality. Okay. Now the thing is, it's not just we all have all of these energies, but we need all of these energies. So if somebody's, purely sattvic, they're not going to be able to pay their bills because they're not practical enough. Okay. And if they're that sattvic, they may forget to eat because they're just going to be like, ooh, floating around like a helium balloon. And they probably wouldn't be able to sleep because their mind is so light and ethereal that they can't actually shut their mind down enough to actually sleep. Okay. So, again, everybody has all of these. Some people have more of a tendency than the others, and we need all of these. So that's why I want to put all this out here to get away from this usual thing that I read about Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas in terms of like, oh, we should all be sattvic, or Rajas is bad, or Tamas is bad, or something. It's again, I wouldn't put those labels of good and bad. Again, I would just come to a more neutral. I come from a more neutral stance in terms of these are all energies and they're actually all useful in certain areas of life. So one is not better than the other. So before you're like, oh, I'm a Tamasic sign, I just want to put that out there. Okay, so moving on to Rajas. Rajas constellations are also called Chara Rashis or movable Rashis. And the four constellations that are Rajasic in nature, are primarily Rajasic in nature, are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. So the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th constellations of zodiacs. So when people have a lot of planets in these Rajas constellations, they can be hyperactive. They have a hard time slowing down because all of their planets are in this Rajasic, these Rajasic houses or these Rajasic constellations. So energies, again, qualities associated with the Rajasic nature are active, moving, restless, doing, task-oriented. Um, and this is kind of the movers and shakers, but this whole kind of energy of like, oh, let me go get a job and make money and buy a house and create a family. That's all actually Rajasic in nature. And again, not that any of it's bad, but it tends to be a little bit more practical or pragmatic. And the thing is, people tend to get attached to these things. So, because there's attachment and desire associated with this Rajasic quality, agitation can show up in the mind because you're either winning or losing these things, right? These things are coming and going, all these kind of external practical things. And so that can create agitation in the mind. So also things like passions and lust. So again, different types of desire, joy and sorrow, because again, am I winning? Am I losing? Am I gaining? Which way am I heading with this Rajasic kind of tendency to want to accumulate and to create in the more physical, tangible sense of that. And again, anger, greed, arrogance, envy can be associated with the Rajasic nature. Okay. Then we have Tamas, which is also, these constellations are also called stera Rashis or fixed Rashis. And they are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So the second, fifth, eighth, and 11th constellations of the zodiac. Now, again, it sounds negative, and I actually cleaned this up because the lists I was reading were like really, really negative. So, again, I'm trying to get to more of a neutral space with these descriptions here. But tamasic energy can be kind of unclear. The mind can be fuzzy for different reasons. There can be an absence of right judgment. There can be doubt. There can be suspicion. There can be dullness. There can be inertia. Like fixed Rashis, most of these constellations, like Taurus, Leo, these are people that are hard to move, hard to budge, just generally with their personality. Um, so they can, and I talked about sleep before, so people who are very tamasic, they can have a tendency, if they're imbalanced, towards excessive sleep. because again, there's so much inertia, it slows down their mind and their body, and they just, kind of check out that way. Lethargy, fear, depression, lack of motivation. Okay. But the thing is, again, we all need Tamas. We all need to slow down. We all need to like sleep, to find a balance. So again, all of these energies in balance. So then if we look to the horoscope on the right here, whereas before when we were looking at Rashi categories and the elements, and now we're looking at Rashi categories and the gunas here, now you see instead of being in a triangle formation, when you take one of these categories like Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, here again, I lined up the constellations. So we have Aries in the rising sign, Lagna, first house. And the other Rajasic constellations are Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. So you have 1, 4, 7, 10. So you can see they actually form the square, the Kendras, in a horoscope. So that's significant, yeah. But they're also easy to spot that way. So in any horoscope, the 4 squares in the middle are going to be either Sattvic, Rajasic, or Tamas. And the 4 squares in the middle are actually kind of the core of somebody. So it does give like a kind of predominant energy, but again, it doesn't have to. I just want to try to get away again from this idea that one's better than the other, or we need all of them. Yeah. So that's how you can identify just by looking at a chart um, where these different categories, the guna categories of constellations and Rashis are. All right, so that's it for today. Hope you found this helpful and useful. Again, all of my teaching videos are in my concepts playlist. I do offer personal birth chart readings on Zoom. If that's of interest, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com. And I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine that includes other Vedic arts like Ayurveda, yoga, as well as other paradigms of medicine like homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so you might find that interesting as well. But as always, I hope you found this helpful as you navigate the energy cycles of your life. Until the next one, take care. Namaste.